Welcome back, brothers and sisters. My name is Braden, and you are used to seeing me on a show called Langley Outdoors Academy. But this is a new show with a new focus and a new mission, and we are going to drive the Second Amendment forward in the best way that we possibly can. This show is called Second Legacy, and the guy that I have co-hosting with me right here is none other than Tim. He needs no introduction. You probably know him from the Military Arms channel, since he is, I would consider, the OG of the YouTube world. So, Tim, what are we going to talk about today, my man?
Well, we have a couple of things. You know what? The one thing that has really piqued my interest in the news cycle right now is what's going on over in Illinois, right? So
Okay.
let's talk about Illinois and their assault weapons ban, because this is something that obviously gets talked about at the federal level quite a bit. This is something with regards to various states in the United States. These are things that states are messing with. California has been messing with assault weapons bans for some time. Illinois is trying to follow in California's footsteps. And what's interesting when you take a look at these pieces of legislation, they are pulling from existing legislation that's already either been passed or has been talked about. So obviously, the new Illinois law has elements from California's laws, but also has elements from the federal proposed assault weapons ban of 2021 and 2022. And so they've just kind of taken all this stuff that would seem like pie in the sky, impossible to pass stuff, and they packaged it up and actually got the House in the state of Illinois to pass this. Now it goes to the Senate. And the provisions within this law are mind-boggling. There's no way this is going to pass a constitutional test in the courts if we don't have activist judges hearing the court cases. What's your
100% agree. I mean, see, that's the thing. You hit on something so powerful. Something that's been happening since the Bruin decision. I mean, if you're seeing this, bounce it off me. But what's happening is all these anti-gun states are taking all the same ideas and they're making this amalgamation of what they really want it to be, which it flies in the face of the Bruin decision. It flies in the face of the Heller decision. It flies in the face of every possible pro-gun decision from the Supreme Court. And it's almost like they're not just throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. They're throwing anything gun control to get as much motivation and much energy and much fundraising before it gets struck down. I mean, it's almost comical.
It would be comical if it wasn't so serious. And the fact that they keep ignoring existing rulings and keep coming up with this stuff, I don't know. There's something broken, right? When the Supreme Court speaks, that should be it. There should be no more discussion about that particular subject. It's been decided, right?
Mm-hmm.
Take Heller, Bruin, any of those decisions. But yet here we have the Supreme Court firmly putting its foot down on something. And then the states go, yeah, that's a neat suggestion. Let's go ahead and make another law that basically violates that Supreme Court decision. And they keep doing this. There's no accountability.
Yeah, they said sensitive places. So therefore, we can obviously play with sensitive places. They left the door open.
Yeah.
In the Bruin decision, they said specifically, you cannot do sensitive places. The entire island of Manhattan cannot be a sensitive place.
Right.
And yet that's exactly what they did. California, hey, it's probably not constitutional to mandate insurance for a constitutional right. It's probably also not constitutional to say you have to have a fee to have that right in this city. And while it's in pending litigation, they don't employ it. They just pull it from actual deployment. The judge says, it's not actually being deployed, so no rights are being infringed. So when you employ it, we can come back and revisit it. So then New Jersey says, hey, wait, they got away with it. So now we're going to do it too. It's going to be great. It's just, like you said, I think you said it really, really well. If it wasn't so serious, it would be hilarious.
Right.
But it's mind-boggling.
Well, here's what really gets under my skin is if we were talking about anything other than firearms, any other constitutional right, this wouldn't even be a discussion. It would get slapped down immediately. But because it relates to firearms, it seems like this type of stuff just keeps happening. And I think why we're seeing this at the state level is because at the federal level, the anti-gunners have been frustrated in their attempts to pass legislation like this. And so now it's going down to the state level where they've seen more success in the past in terms of implementing gun control. And so it's not surprising to me because I've said for several years now, I think the fight's going to transition from the federal level to the state level. And then it's going to be drawn up into the federal level when it goes to the federal court systems as people bring lawsuits against these pieces of legislation. So let's take a look at what Illinois has wrapped up in this assault weapons ban. And I'm doing air quotes because we all know we don't have to say this, but we do, because in the Second Amendment community, everybody wants to point out, well, there's no such thing as an assault weapon. Well, okay, we understand that. Assault rifle, assault weapon, two different things.
Before you jump into that, you just hit on something so crucial. You have to, when you're communicating with people, when you're bringing people over to your side, when you're having a debate, regardless if something truly exists or not, it's what they know it exists. The perception exists. Therefore, you have to speak in their language. Whether it's incorrect or not, you still have to reach them where they're at. That's the key point. If you want to bring people to the table, you may have to swallow the idea that saying assault weapon, even though it is not a correct term, it is a branded term by the gun controllers. It's still how it's known because the media has inundated the people you're targeting with that term.
Since 1994, it's part of the vernacular now.
Right. And if you get bogged down on, well, no, we're not going to talk about the important point. We're going to talk about the fact that you can't say assault weapon because that's not a real word. You're losing the forest through the trees.
Right.
And that's incredibly important piece that we need to focus on going forward. But anyway, sorry.
No, you're absolutely right. But that happens a lot within the community. We're so busy playing semantics that we lose sight of what we're actually trying to accomplish here. So, this law, in a nutshell, it makes it unlawful to deliver, sell, or purchase, or cause to be delivered, sold, or purchased, or cause to be possessed by another an assault weapon attachment, a 50 caliber rifle, or 50 caliber cartridge. It makes it unlawful for any person to knowingly possess an assault weapon, 50 caliber cartridge, 50 caliber rifle, and 300 days after the effective date of this act. And so that's interesting. Now, there's a lot more in the act besides just that.
Oh, yeah.
It gets into a lot of minutia, everything from Olympic target shooting to all sorts of stuff.
The hunting shotguns.
The hunting shotguns. Yeah, your shotgun can only have 5 rounds unless it's a specific waterfowl season. Then it can have more than 5 rounds while you're in the field, but when you go back home, you can only have 5 rounds in your shotgun. And bits and pieces of this legislation that comes straight out of California, stuff like a magazine isn't a magazine if you have to disassemble the firearm to insert it or to remove it. So, we've seen that with California, because California has been all over the map with, the non-pistol grip pistol grips, with having to break the gun open to load it. Then that negates other aspects of the bullet button. I mean, they've tried all this different stuff to basically restrict a firearm from simply loading itself. It's 2023. And the problem they have is when you just distill this down to what it actually is that they're concerned with, is a firearm that loads itself. In 2023. 100%. That's like being upset about cars being responsible for so many deaths on highways because they have automatic transmissions in them. If we go back to manual transmissions, perhaps we can reduce the number of automotive deaths on highways in the United States. It's that asinine. And
yeah, it is.
They call out lever actions. It's not going to be considered an assault weapon if it's bolt operated or lever operated or pump operated, because you can't cycle a lever action very quickly. I guess I've never seen a cowboy action match with a little bit of,
right, exactly.
And as soon as somebody does something they shouldn't with a lever action, I guarantee you they'll try to amend this law to include lever actions, especially when if they ever see one of the new tactical lever actions that are out there, like the new one from POF, they're probably going to lose their minds. Oh my gosh, you can put a flippy thing that goes up on it.
A flippy thing? Whoa, hold on a second.
Yeah, flippy things.
So that's, you're hitting. See, this is why this show, I think, is so important for what we discuss on a day-to-day basis, because we're starting to go into now the core crux of the issue. If you look at the government across the board, it's quite literally, in the past 20 to 30 years, been a game of legislation trying to play catch up with technology, right? So if you look at freedom of speech issues with Twitter or Facebook or Google, all these things, the technology burns way ahead and the legislation tries to catch up, and they don't even understand what they're talking about. If you've ever seen a Twitter hearing or Google or YouTube, those CEOs, those guys, they're trying to talk the lowest denominator they can, and Congress is still not getting it. Yeah. And so by the time Congress catches up to where they were in that meeting, they're already 9 more yards down the road, and they're going down different algorithms and all sorts of stuff. It's the same thing with any industry, with cars. And more importantly for our audience, the Second Amendment, they don't understand what they're dealing with. They don't understand what we have. They don't understand the rights and how they work together. it's really a comedy of errors based in ignorance because the government moves slower than free markets every
Yes.
time.
Yes. And when you take a look at the bill in California, to your point, I mean, they go through and they call out things that are already illegal and they reban
Right.
them. Stuff that's been banned at the federal level for generations. and
And
and you
so did the
can't man,
Chicago one.
you can't remanufacture semi-automatic into a machine gun. Yeah, we know.
Right.
That was
Yeah,
imposed on us already.
exactly. That's the point. And so, I mean, some of the quotes that we heard come out of the assault weapons ban that just passed in Illinois, well, it passed the House, just so we're clear. It's
Right.
not passed the Senate. Pritzker has been saying that he's going to sign it immediately. I mean, the whole thing was done in the dark of night. It was done at 2 a.m. It was done right before the new legislators were sworn in. It was a lame duck session. I mean, like this is the modus operandi. We know this, right?
Right.
But they even said in the interviews, like what the Speaker of the House in Illinois said, well, we may not all be on board with this legislation, but the problem is people are suffering from gun violence in every state of Illinois. What? If you're
Yeah.
not on board with it, why are you voting for it?
Right.
Is it a
We're not really on
signal?
board. We're going to vote for it, but we're not really on board with it. Talk about non-committal.
Yeah,
Don't hold me accountable for what I'm about to do.
right.
I don't really like what I'm doing, but I'm going to do it anyway.
It's not my fault.
Yeah, it's not my fault. This was imposed upon me. It's the will of the people.
Absolutely. It's the will of the people. I mean, we didn't do it. And on top of that, I mean, look at Chicago, the number one gun control zone in the country. No, don't look at Chicago. Never mind. Withdrawn. I mean, it's just don't go over there. It's not a good look. And it's just something that kills me about this whole thing is it's an assault weapons ban when all the problem that they're pointing to has nothing to do with assault weapons.
Right.
The FBI statistics, the city statistics, all the statistics, it's handguns. And after that, it's feet and bludgeons and fists.
Like rifles of any type is so far down the list, it doesn't even make the list half the time.
It's ridiculous.
Yep.
And that gets back again to your point of the semi-automatics are the next stop because, well, those are now weapons of war because we got rid of those weapons of war. So now the next weapons of war, they can load themselves.
Yes.
Crazy.
Can't have it's like an AI. You can't have guns loading themselves. But in all seriousness, but this is something that they want to do. And this is where the danger of what ATF is doing with its bump stock ruling, with its brace ruling that's pending. This is the danger of it. And this is why we always said when we went to sue them, when we were fighting over it, people were saying, I'm not going to get involved with the bump stock thing. It's stupid. Who wants a bump stock anyway? It's not the point. The point has never been the stock. It wasn't the point. The point was, and always has been, the mechanism by which this agency is changing law, writing law on its own without an act of Congress. This can't stand. And what the ATF is doing through these continued efforts and these continued setting of precedent is that eventually they can get to the point where they can simply rule, and this is not some conspiracy theorist. These are conversations that take place in DC. They can simply decide that an AR-15 is readily convertible because you can buy parts online, and therefore they're going to ban it because it's now readily convertible because they were given that power within the 1968 Gun Control Act, right? Readily convertible is a phrase within the act that allows ATF to go, yeah, if it's readily convertible, we can regulate it. So all they have to say is
perfect case in point.
Yes.
Perfect case in point. They just did the exact same thing with the ghost gun legislation. The rule that they came out with, they changed overnight with Christmas, like the most recent one they just announced.
Yeah.
And they said they basically did a complete adjustment to their approach versus the tactical machining case in Texas, where they were getting nailed for First Amendment infringements, where they were getting nailed for the Second Amendment infringements, where they were getting nailed for not clearly stating their purposes and changing their mind and not giving a good reason as to why. That's one of the reasons when they came out in that letter, they said readily convertible. That was literally the quote that they used, building off of the 1968 Gun Control Act. Everything is backed and backed and backed and stacked behind itself. Yep. That's the big problem. That's the huge problem. And you're hitting on the core of the issue. Again, man, Tim, you are on it. Have you been doing this for a while?
It's almost like we've studied this or something, yes.
Man, I tell you what, you are on it. But that's the thing. If you go down this road of Chevron deference, and you start to say, like, well, you know, different bureaucracies are part of the executive branch can just interpret law as they see fit because Congress wouldn't do everything perfect. So we're just going to take the liberty and define it the way that we want to define it because that's what happened. They are changing definitions. And that's why they got smoked on the West Virginia versus EPA case. That's exactly what the EPA was doing. They were changing carbon dioxide as a poisonous gas. And the Supreme Court said, you can't do that. And
Right.
for some reason, that doesn't translate over the ATF too well. I don't really
No,
understand
because now
why.
we're going to have to sue to hold the ATF to the same accountability
You know
standards.
what? Look at it this way. It's something to talk about, Tim. Look at it that way.
Yeah,
Something to do.
it is. It just keeps them busy and feeds the machine. But the
100%.
danger is always going to lie within these bureaucracies because we have a voice at the representative level. So this is what's frustrating the anti-gunners in DC, because we still maintain that majority of defending our Second Amendment rights, right? We've been successful up to this point in most cases. As a matter of fact, a lot of people would say that, things have gotten worse over time. I would argue they've actually gotten better in a number of areas. Certain areas have gotten worse. But keep in mind, 20 years ago, all 50 states didn't have concealed carry. Now all 50 states do at some level of concealed carry, right? Some are shall issue, some are may issue. But we're also seeing more and more states coming on board with constitutional carry. Indiana just joined the club this last year. And so more states are coming on to constitutional carry, and we're now able to carry handguns. At some point, a lot of people say, I don't want the feds, regulating reciprocity. I don't want the feds coming in and saying, we're going to force reciprocity across all 50 states. Others within the community would say, well, that makes sense. The feds force states to recognize each other's permits and licenses. Driver's licenses are a perfect example of that. Could you imagine if you got a driver's license in Indiana but couldn't drive in Illinois? You'd have to go get a driver's license in every state that you plan on driving in. Well, how does that translate to a constitutionally protected right when driving isn't a constitutionally protected right? So
100%.
So yes, I think somebody should force reciprocity. If the states won't do it on their own, then somebody from the federal courts, somebody has to say, hey guys, you have to honor each other's licenses and permits. You can't do this.
Well,
you can't go to Illinois and become a felon for something that's legal in your home state.
Correct. And so this is what, this is awesome. So one of the things that you're diving into right there, and you can almost, well, I don't know about you, but I can almost hear certain people who be watching this and saying like, well, no, any gun control law is unconstitutional. Any type of license is unconstitutional. You should not have to have a license for your constitutional rights. You have to look at it, and going back to what you originally said to lead into this segment, you have to look at it from a standpoint of an entire chessboard. And something that you said to me originally when we were brainstorming this idea on the show, they've had 100 years to build this across the board. We are breaking it down slowly, and we are frustrating them, and we are irritating them, and we are doing some really great work, but it's not going to be a swing overnight to where it's just ripped out from the root. It's got to be slowly curtailed the way it got installed. That's exactly how it happened. That's how it's got to come out. Right. And that's a good example. Reciprocity. That's a great example. Okay, what about constitutional carry? We just picked up 50% of the states. 25 states are now constitutional carry. That's incredible.
And so that goes down to forcing reciprocity, right? So my state is constitutional carry. So that means I should be able to carry in all 50 states just by this mere fact that I'm an Indiana citizen. Because my state says, we honor your right to carry a defensive weapon, and you don't need a permit from us to do it. We're not going to tax you to exercise your right. You're just allowed to do that in the free state of Indiana, right?
Right. And so like this is what I love about these conversations, because what you just hit on, and imagine like 7 minutes ago, we started talking about something completely related, but a little bit different. This started with the Illinois assault weapons ban, but now we're getting into the different pieces of, can you tax a right? Wait, isn't there a Supreme Court decision that says you can't tax a right?
As it relates to newspapers, but we still haven't applied it to firearms yet.
Right. The ATF, they can use Chevron deference, but the EPA can't use Chevron deference. Like, wait, hold on a second, guys. There's a bit of an incongruence in enforcement here. And that's where we're going. It's going to take a while for us to chop it down because the legislative process works slowly. We talked about it in the intro for this whole segment. The technology flies ahead and it's going to take time. But the most important thing that we have to understand, this is the fight for our rights to go to the next generation. And it's going to take patience. It's going to take resolve. This is going to take time, but we will get there because we have the foundations laid. That's what we're doing right now. And I think that's something that sometimes gets lost on, well, the Supreme Court made the ruling. Why are they not enforcing it?
We do see a lot of folks on the internet getting frustrated, and rightfully so, right? When things 100%. Like this bill in Illinois crop up, they get angry, and people want results now. And I understand that. We want our rights back, and we want them back yesterday. Stop messing with our rights. Leave us alone. I get that. But as you said, it took us over 100 years to get to this point, and you can't just flip a switch and unwind it all. It's going to take time and commitment, and you need to be politically active. You can't just sit back, never having contacted your representatives, never have written a single email, made a single phone call, never done anything, but you sit around and complain on the internet. We're not fixing things fast enough, but you're not taking part in the political process. That's not how this works. I understand the desire to get it done now, but you can't go, well, look, I can't get constitutional carry in my state today, so dang it, let's just go to war. I don't think that's the solution here.
Right. So what you're diving into is I think it's important to note that it's the ultimate frustration.
Right.
Because if you're talking about someone who has the constitutional rights that we have, which we absolutely do, there's no question. Are these people infringing on those rights because they don't want those rights for others? Absolutely. Is that unconstitutional? Absolutely. It takes time to work through this. And I think the best reference that you could make from our historical standpoint would be that if there's trouble, let it come in my day so that my children don't have to deal with it. That's a paraphrase, but that's an incredibly important piece. Like the fight that we're doing, this isn't for me to go into the next week and go, ha, got him. What is for me is, no, wait, my children won't have to deal with the same infringements because we already dealt with the problem.
Right.
And that's incredibly important to understand. This is that the fight is not only in time, but it's also for the next generation so that they get that torch of freedom and they get to fight and pass it on for the next things that come up, because freedom is always under attack. Always.
It is. And it's not to say that the time may not come, God forbid that it does, that, people aren't pushed into taking more drastic measures, but I don't believe the time is now, not even close to now.
No.
We still have plenty of political options that we need to be politically active in taking part in the political process to stop these things and to get our agenda pushed through. That's how a republic works. You're not always going to be the victor in every election. And so you can't go, well, we didn't win this election, so let's just, let's get this game on. No, that's not how this is supposed to work. So you got to temper down this.
That point.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
But to that point, though, that's a perfect example. Yeah, this election did not work out. The viewers on my channel, they will tell you I was all like, they are going to get smoked. Flat out, I will say, like, I was looking at data reports, I was looking at polling reports, I was looking across the board, and I was like, they're about to get walloped. Yep. And they didn't.
Yep.
They flat out didn't. And for whatever reason, the point is, where we're left is we still had the House taken and flipped. Okay, so theoretically, we're going to talk about the House speakership thing in the next episode.
Yes.
But you're talking about the system of government being built to be slow, to respect the people's rights. That's the important piece. The House is not going to pass any gun control bill coming out from the Senate. The Senate is not going to pass any gun rights bill coming from the House. And Biden would certainly never sign a gun rights bill because he is, like, found for some reason his second calling is to attack the Second Amendment. Yeah. But that's the important piece. Like, if the people had not voted, if the House had not flipped, we would have been in the exact same situation we were 2 years ago. And of that 2 years, the only thing that they have to hang their hat on at all, amongst all the losses that they took, was the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which was, in general, a big slush fund for red flag laws, which had a safeguard built into it, which said, by the way, you have to have due process. And the big joke is, any state that has red flag laws right now, most of them don't have that due process and don't qualify for that money. And then they changed the rules for 18-year-olds. That one was a huge deal for me.
Oh, it's a big deal. I mean, at the gun store, we see that being a major problem already.
100%. Well, but that goes back to the ATF, because the ATF started to incorporate that in Maine. They started to, you know what, we can't really pick and choose the 18-year-olds. We're just going to do a blanket sweep of 18 to 20-year-olds. Mm-hmm. And then sure as the sun shines, a month later, you've got it. It's now changed on the 4473s, and that's crucial. That's how this works.
Yep.
But we got to fix it.
We got to fix it, and we can fix it. And that's what we
100%.
Implore you that are watching the show right now, is just to get politically active. A phone call is by far the best. This is coming from somebody that's been to DC several times and talking to those representatives. When the call goes out and people start blowing up the phone lines of their representatives, it does make a difference. They have to scurry because they have to take those interns that are working those phones, have to answer every single phone call, and they have to keep a tally sheet of what that particular constituent had to say. And then that gets presented to the representative. It does make a difference. Now, less effective, but still useful are emails, right? And there's supposed to be an intern that goes to the emails and keeps a tally sheet. And again, transmits that information to the representative. But nothing replaces that good old fashioned phone call because it ties up a resource. The phone's ringing off the hook, gets people's attentions. When those phones start ringing and everybody's running around like, oh my goodness, what just happened? Some video went live and now they're blowing up our phones. They take notice. I've had representatives call my gun store looking for me saying, hey, can you have him call off the dogs? Our phone lines are blowing up. This is when that Florida Republican, was pushing the bump stock ban right after it happened.
Yeah.
He pushed it. And I can't remember the last name, started with a C, but his office called and wanted me to call off the dogs because their phone lines were blowing up. And ultimately he lost re-election and that he was a one-term, representative, largely because of his actions. But it does make a difference. It really frustrates them. So please become politically active and be part of the process, because if you're not, you become part of the problem. And we have more than enough people on our side in this argument to win. We really do. But
absolutely.
It's only if we unify and we fight together as one force and we stop the infighting and the bickering and all the other stuff that goes on, typically in the online community. In person, it's a completely different community. But we try to pull together and accomplish something, and we can. But we have to fight together.
That's right. And speaking of pulling together and unifying, we are going to talk about the speakership of McCarthy, or the almost speakership, or the kind of speakership, on the next episode. And that is an amazing segue into the next one.
All right, guys, so let's do that. If you enjoy the content you saw in today's video, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe, and to share this information with other folks out there. And we'll see you in the next broadcast where we talk about the speakership and what's going on with Leader McCarthy.